Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo alongside you guys. We had a little bit of a wait for this podcast. Obviously, so much has happened within the past week or so. First of all, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you love all the content, we appreciate all of your support. But yeah, firstly, before we get into some of the stuff, Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Battling some allergies at the moment, but
Oh my God, yeah.
stretch
Tell
run
me about it.
season, right? So you gotta
It's
push on.
that time of year. So coincides with Milan just being an absolutely allergic reaction to being normal, because as you could see here, Milan drawing against Sassuolo 3-3. We'll get into the first leg against Rome, but we'll do Europa League a little bit later into the podcast here. But we have to start off with what happened over the weekend. And basically, Milan going with a B-sided sort of lineup. It's hard to predict lineups when there's a European match into the league. But for Milan here, playing one of the worst teams in Serie A, one of the worst Sassuolos we've seen since they've come up, probably the worst. And yet Milan still somehow managed to draw 3-3. To be quite honest with you, this should have been a 5-3 Milan win if there was just normal offside rules and nothing of bullshit, to put it quite simply. We'll get into some of those screenshots, but overall, this was a total mental lapse by Milan. And it mostly comes from this defense, because this defense was absolutely putrid. Simon Kjaer, definitely the weakest link, unfortunately. That first goal, Matt, by Pinamonti, the inexcusable marking by professionals. And I know people want to blame Pioli for the selection of some of these guys, but the facts are this. If you don't know how to mark inside your own penalty area, then you're just not a professional footballer at this point. So your first thoughts on that start by Sassuolo, 2 goals in 10 minutes?
Terrible. And, I think this, a match like this against this team, and, I know we talked very, very briefly about Sassuolo before, and I tweeted out our conversation. I'll keep it off the podcast. You guys can go check that out on Twitter. But I expected more from this game. As given Milan's form, I know they played very underwhelming against Roma on that Thursday. But I had a feeling, I was like, all right, like the Sassuolo are a team that fired the coach. They're relegation threatened. They have a lot of players that are underperforming at the moment. Loriente, of course, they always highlighted, on the broadcast, his lack of finishing this year. He hasn't been as clinical. And of course, here he goes and puts a couple by us, which is obviously textbook Milan, right? With this defense, it's nothing is off the table. And sure enough, inside the first quarter of an hour, Milan gave up 2 goals and they're behind the 8 ball. So now you're in a position where, all right, well, you either punt on the game. Do you try to chase the game? What's the kind of approach there from Stefano Pioli? And the lineup that he put out, just to kind of like wind it back a little bit, I thought it was pretty fair. I know that Max and Gino, their podcast, I listened to it, on my way to work yesterday. Go check them out. And I started to kind of align with their beliefs. Initially, I was saying, hey, you rotate, you get some players in there, it's business end of the season, as they highlighted the episode. So I figured, I was like, maybe you rotate some guys in, but you give some starters some opportunity, right? Like, you don't want to go completely reserves in a game like this. You want to get some momentum heading into the Roma game. And of course, the derby on the weekend, or on Monday, shall I say.
Yeah.
But as this game played out, and as I started to kind of hear their thoughts on the game, I tended to really align with what they were saying, because look, if we're very comfortably in second place, top 4 is all but secured at this point.
Top 5, really,
massive meltdown from us. We're not getting first, regardless of whether or not Inter get the title against us. They're going to get it anyway. Like, it's theirs, right? So with all that being said, I was a bit confused as to how Pioli approaches game. You played Rafa, the entire game?
Pretty much.
Right? Did he play the entire game? So you're playing your star player the entire game in a game that, by all accounts, doesn't really mean all that much in the landscape of our positioning in the top 4 and getting, the like a title. We're not getting a title, right? So I started to kind of scratch my head about that. But just from the performance standpoint alone, based on what the players were doing out there, disappointing. I mean, Kjaer passed it.
Horrible.
Thanks for playing for us. We appreciate everything. Horrible, slow, beat 1v1 very easily by Sassuolo's players up front.
Look at this.
And
Look at this.
Yeah, it's dreadful. I mean, back post, he's wide open, right? Like there's no
He's
one there.
right. He's here. He's
And look
here,
at the
right?
unmarked guy at the back. No one has zero
Florenzi
clue that he's
here.
there, right?
Loriente. I mean, just like look at the acres
It's
of space.
And then
Adley's
Malik
been
Chow,
no man's land.
who's on the opposite side of his career. He's much younger. He's very tall. He's physical. And he just has not looked good since he's come back from injury.
Yeah.
And, we're getting to that point where, thankfully, we had some health. We had, Tomori come back. Gabi has played really well since he returned from loan. So we kind of have an understanding of who our main defenders are, our two main defenders at this point. But man, defensively, we were so poor. There was so much space in the midfield. I mean, Sassuolo had all day to do anything they wanted. Credit to the guys for coming back and for making this a game. But it's more so disappointing on the fact that, like, you're down 2-0 to Sassuolo to start the game 15 minutes. That's the tone you're going to set heading into your two most important games of the season. I mean, a derby is always important, but for pride purposes, like, you want to show up against Inter. I think they've won 7 straight derbies against us. Like, this is the type of performance you're going to put up there. It's terrible. It's terrible. And look, I know people might think I'm being too harsh. Look at Milan's in second place. They're in, they're where are they at in the Europa League? They could still win that. Yes, they can. But I think it's time we start holding our club to a different standard.
Yeah,
that we don't have to accept mediocrity. We don't have to accept performances like this. We don't have to piss and moan and cry about it. But the fact of the matter is, we're here to judge the performance, and the performance was poor. And at this point of the season, you expect your defense to at least start around into some decent form. They're still leaking in goals. There's still plenty of concern there, right? The midfield is very up and down. Sometimes we look very sharp.
This was
commanding. And then the attack, right? Like, we haven't put together many complete performances where defensively, rock solid. In the midfield, we are able to dictate the game. And up top, we're able to score. The attack is the main thing right now. Everyone's pretty much firing, bar Giroud. I mean, look at the game, right? Jovic, goal. Leao, goal. Chukwueze, 2 goals ruled offside, which in my view were completely fair goals, but based on the rules, they're called off.
It's all technical.
Like, so your attack is clicking. Like, this is where Milan should be wanting to be playing their best football. And they're really not convincing me that they're going to be starting to head in that direction. With the batch of games that we have left in the season, I'm just a little bit concerned that, maybe top 4 is safe, but bigger picture from optics, it's like, now you start to kind of ask questions of which players are actually worthy of staying. Like, do you start looking at certain players in this team and looking at their role?
I mean, I think
they got to go.
I think that's been decided on certain players already. I think this has been known. And I think the bigger questions on the manager at this point, right? Because some are like, oh, well, like second place finish, he kind of rallied. He didn't have defenders for a while, and he might go. And it was contingent upon a great Europa League run. But whatever happens tomorrow, we'll see. I think he's going to lose his job if he gets eliminated. And even then, even if they narrowly escape, like, you have to play Leverkusen, regardless of that. So, like, to get into the point of what Gino and Max are saying, right? Here's why it's so egregious on Pioli's side. Filippo Terracciano, where is he? What does he have to do? What does he have to do? Seriously, when are we going to say, yeah, we like this guy for an investment down the road to become a player? When does he even get that opportunity? And then you kind of look at Giancarlo Simic, right? In the match against Monza, where he has to get subbed on because I believe Pobega got hurt, Simic comes in, proves that he's capable of playing at this level against a Monza side who's probably going to finish on the top half of the table, right? And that's not an easy opponent, as we've seen. They beat us, obviously. So with that, you're kind of wondering, why doesn't he get that opportunity over Simon Kjaer, who's on his way out? He's done. It's over with. Then you line up in a double pivot where I love Musa and Yassine Adli as individual players, but you don't play them together in a double pivot system. It just doesn't make sense. They're not defensive midfielders like that when their best qualities are obviously moving forward. I know Adli has improved in certain aspects as opposed to what he used to be, but my goodness, that just doesn't make sense as a fit. And we're not even like talking about, Milan's creativity and how much Giroud is lacking, because we see the video on the counterattack with Luka Jovic and he's trying to distribute the ball and Giroud's touch is so poor and he really can't get in behind the defense. And we all have known this for so long. This is why I wanted Noah Okafor for for example, to start in a game like this, whether it was left wing, whether it was up top. The guy has proven time and time again that he's a worthy actual Champions League player. So the fact that he can't even start against the Sassuolo side when you're down 1-0, having to go to the Olimpico with Rafael Leao needing some rest, and now, as you mentioned, plays a full 90 minutes. So we're sitting here saying to ourselves, does the defense have to play better and do a better job as individuals? Irrelevant to the manager, yes, but does the manager have to do a better job of preparing them and selecting the right 11 for this match, that you could still gather the 3 points and not only not have to stress about Inter on Monday and whether or not they win the Scudetto over you, because that's just optics, right? Because as you mentioned, they're going to win it regardless, but you don't want them to win it against you. If you simply win their draw against Cagliari, they can't win the Scudetto against you. So now you have to actually worry about that, because you do, right? You do, regardless if they're going to win the title or not, depending on our results. It's different. And now you have to worry about Roma, where you're going to the Olimpico. It's a very tough job to go in there and try and win that. Now, listen, you get Tomori back for that one. We'll get into that. But Samuel Chukwueze here, man, I mean, he's robbed of a brace, because I want to talk about this side of it, because this is bullshit. I mean, we're literally going to be pulling up both of these offside calls now, right? So here's the first one where he comes back into an onside position. He scores the header here. I mean, this is just like, come on now. This isn't a difference between scoring a goal or not. If you played this sport, you know almost everything about it. I get the technicality with the rules, and there's fine lines with how Pulisic scored his goal against Genoa as well. But holy crap, man, this isn't the difference between a goal or not. This rule needs to be fixed. And I'll get to the second one in just a moment here while you talk about it. Dude, like, what do you even say to this at this point? Because in the second goal, you don't even see Chukwueze. You can't even see him. Ready?
Yeah,
look at this, and then you can
covered.
Put your thoughts. People
were literally because I posted this very image, and people were like, just weren't watching the game, or maybe were like outsiders of Serie A. They were like, I'm confused. What am I looking at? Like, I don't exactly, like, you don't see Chukwueze anywhere. There's no the other image of the first goal. You see the shoulder, but I agree with you. Like, there's really no advantage gained from that, right? But this one, it's almost as if it was like you basically stacked, almost like someone photoshopped Chukwueze out of this. Like, you don't see another player. It's like, why am I looking at a Sassuolo player? There's no one else in this image. That's what it looks like. So I understand people, might come in the comments. I had Inter fans chirping me. One guy said, winners celebrate, losers figure out a way to, but they want to change the rules. I'm paraphrasing it, but no. I want the rule to be the correct way of looking at the sport, right? Like, if Inter scored this goal, I would say that's a goal. Like, he's onside, right? If it was Juventus, I would say the same thing. This idea that because I'm a Milan fan, and you could be an Inter fan, someone could be a Juventus fan, and a Napoli fan, that automatically I have my Milan red and black glasses on, and that's the only way I view the sport.
People are idiots.
It's very frustrating on Twitter when you're trying to have civil conversations and discourse, and it's always turning into Milan fans are just complaining. The way I'm a Milan fan, but I observe the game, in my view, very fairly. And if this happened to Lautaro Martinez and he was robbed of 2 goals, I obviously would be like, great, it helps us because they got a draw. But at the same time, I would look at it and say, he's not offsides. Like, if you were really looking at I get the rule, but if we're looking at the sport itself and the instance itself, like, does he really get an advantage from this? No. These are perfectly valid goals. And if we're going to not call these goals, then it's like, what's the rule here? Like, elbow's good, but if he's completely level with the guy, but you zoom in and you see that he's a centimeter off, he's offsides, it doesn't count. If it's foot placement, if it's just a complete torso where he's in an advanced running position where he's more forward than the defender, I can kind of get on side with that. No pun intended. But at the same time, you just look at it and it's almost like more like disappointing for a player that had a really good game. He has nothing to show for it on his stat sheet, And that unless you watch the game and know that he played very well. So then what does Pioli do? He takes him off in the 65th minute, and Chukwueze was visibly upset about that because the game's still in the balance. Milan are chasing the game, and he knows that minutes have been hard to come by this season. He knows he's had a really difficult first season, and he's playing really well, and he knows that in that Europa League game, he's probably not starting. So for you to pull him off at that point, I would have given Chukwueze, if you're giving Leao the full 90, then I'm giving Chukwueze the full 9, knowing that Pulisic is probably going to start on Thursday. So again, a lot of weird decisions made by Pioli in this game. If you're going to go for it, like you showed that you're going for it with playing Leao the full 90, bringing everybody on late to try to chase this game, then keep that same energy. Keep Chukwueze on. Give him the full 90 that he's very rightfully deserving of, and then you play it from there. But it's just a weird way that he went about this game. And again, I think that there's a lot of things you could take away from this game personally. I just wasn't really a fan of the way he approached it. I mean, defensively, yes, we were awful. We were awful, right? And that's on him. To his defense, that's not on him, right? It's on his, like, that Kair slow as hell, and we really don't have anybody else that we could play back there. Maybe Simic, fine, but when you look at it, you're like, come on. Some of these personnel choices were very questionable into your two most important games of the season.
And then it's the same fan base anyways that's complaining about a non-handball call on Lapadula, which you're right about it. But you're idiots. You're all idiots because you pick and choose when calls are fair or not. You're never being objective about things. And it's just honestly tiring because we do the objectivity constantly. But when it comes to Interista, because people and soccer fans and calcio fans have pea brains. That's the reality of it, right? Because they are doing and commenting on things when it's convenient for them and it goes in their favor. It has nothing to do with, oh, that's the right call or the wrong call. These people are incapable of it. They're always going to be incapable of it. So that's why I just mute people and tell them they're dumb. So moving on. Milan was lifeless to start that first leg against Roma. Really bad, dude. This was kind of like Roma are playing with house money, right? Because we talk about their schedule with De Rossi, they kind of seem a little bit reborn compared to what they were under Mourinho, certainly. And so my thing is here, why did they look so lifeless? Why was it so difficult to get the ball to Leao and Pulisic to try and create anything? Because they were virtually non-existent. And it's not like Roma played sensational. They deserved this result. But in reality, Milan had their opportunities, especially that Chukwueze chance that he created for Giroud. That was a terrible miss. For me, Milan are obviously still in this tie. We'll see what they're going to be able to do, but they made it 10 times harder on themselves, and it was because of a really poor performance that really reminded me of what happened against Newcastle. And again, Matt, their performances in the first two rounds of this knockout stages in Europa League at home, more against Slavia Prague, it's going to catch up to them. And then the second leg against Rennes, that type of play is going to eventually cost them a spot into a next round, depending upon, Leverkusen or probably at this point against Roma. So to come out lifeless like that and have your two best players just virtually do nothing was very frustrating. And then again, the marking on Mancini's goal was terrible. So kudos to them for that. So kind of get into Milan's approach to this, because this is more egregious than what happened against Sassuolo, I think.
I mean, what motivation do you need to head into this game? It's against a club that you had really good success against. You've had their number by all accounts, regardless of who their coach is, right, over the past handful of years, right? So you look at it like, okay, there's no motivation. Like, we're playing at home. I understand, you talked about this on the last episode, how we wish we would kind of play the first leg away, whatever the case may be. You're in front of your home fans against a team you've dominated. You've handled them. And this is the type of performance you put up, like, especially when this is the singular objective at this point, right? Like, top four is a lock. Again, barring a meltdown, because I don't want to say that it's a lock and someone snips this and I'm a meme, right? This is the trophy you're going for, like the Europa League, right? Since we got knocked out of the Champions League, Rafa, I want to win this. I want to win this. We've been showing that we have a desire to win this trophy, and that reflects in the performances. The lineups we've been putting out and how we've been really kind of prioritizing this competition, right? And this is the performance you put up. again, credit to De Rossi. De Rossi's transformed this team since he's taken over from Jose Mourinho. We all know that. The results there. Dybala's playing really well. Pellegrini's reborn. They've gotten some really good performances. They've been galvanized by De Rossi. And look, they're maybe not playing this liquid champagne football, but it's getting results. And Roma are looking at their chances of getting into a top 4 increased by the week. So credit to them, right? But I think when you look at the stats on this, Milan had chances. Milan had chances. They 25 shots, some of them very fairly in good positions to score, didn't capitalize on it. Giroud probably the best one at the very end. But then there was this game was more of a shocker in terms of the details. And what I mean by the details is just a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more desire going into 50-50 balls to win the back. Just a little bit more, hey, cover the space. It seemed at certain points it was just back and forth, slowly moving the ball, slowly, no urgency.
Yeah.
And De Rossi and Roma, they were saying, okay, we'll just sit here. We'll let you guys pass as many times as you want back and forth around the pitch sideways. And until you come at us, you're going to have to go through us to get a goal here. And we didn't. We weren't able to do it. You can look at all the stats. Expected goals, possession, shots, all in favor of Milan. I think we maybe had 1 or 2 more on target shots.
They were like some of these shots were just like
some of the shots,
blinders outside the box.
There was one shot, a lot of low percentage shots, right?
Yeah.
So like the whole shots thing. Oh, we fired more shots.
No, it wasn't.
But they're low percentage, and the none more low percentage than when Milan win the ball high up the pitch, and Gabbia, what does he do? He launches one from 30 yards out, and it's in the curva, right? So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, just those details. That's the difference between a team that wins something and a team that loses something. And all credit to Roma. They are in a really good position. They're playing pretty well. They're thinking, man, we got a 1-0. We cut the clean sheet to a team that's really in fine form away from our comfort zone. You know that Olympico is going to be bouncing. You know that. The Olympico is going to be bouncing. They're playing well. They got the derby win over Lazio. They're in fine form. They're surging up the table. They're trying to make a push. This is going to be a hard match. We knew it was going to be difficult. But I just expected more from Milan in the first leg, and I'm hoping that our perception of Milan as being a team that when they're kind of like behind the 8 ball and they're under pressure and they really truly need to get a result, they do. I'm hoping at least in a big game, I'm hoping that's what we see. Come Thursday, tomorrow at the time of recording. But again, I don't know. Is the mind going to be on the derby? Are they going to be, hey, we need to get a good derby performance? It's one game at a time. You need Rafa to step up. He didn't do much in that Roman game. Very disappointing. He bounced back. He played well against Sassuolo. I just feel that this is going to be a very gritty, hard match for Milan away. But I do feel confident that they can still squeak on by and progress. I still hold that belief.
Yeah, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just a 1-0 lead for Roma. They're not going to have Evan Ndika. Thank God he is okay. So prayers to him and a quick, speedy recovery. I mean, Fikayo Tomori is back in this one. Tomori is a huge addition. This is the best defender in the tie. Don't really care what ignorant Roma fans say, but that's besides the point. Cristante is suspended for this, so they don't have him for the full tie. Again, Tijani Reinders got more rest. That's a big boost. Pulisic didn't really play the entire match.
And the Reinders point real quick, just to make that point. I mean, he's played a ton of minutes this year. He's got
more rest in 2024.
He has because players have kind of come on to form and have shown, Pioli has shown faith in them, right? Finally. But yeah, he's played a ton of minutes, and his performances are not just the kind of measly sideways passes and he just kind of holds things down. He does a lot of running. He exhausts a lot and gives a lot in his performances. So that you're bang on with Reinders. I think having him having the full 90 off on the weekend was important.
Yeah. Listen, Pioli's job is on the line. So with that, I mean, you have to come in with this surprise. I think Roma are in the advantageous spot. They don't have to do too much, but again, a 1-goal lead is nothing. Really isn't. So for me, when you have Milan going into this sort of atmosphere where Roma have played in games like this, right? Regardless, this isn't Champions League, right? But they've had success in the Europa League, getting to last year's final, and again, they literally won the Europa Conference League, and they've played Milan a bunch of times. So this is a familiar opponent for them. This isn't something that they're scared of, and they've proven not to be scared of the moment under De Rossi, on top of actually playing pretty decent football. I thought they were okay against Milan. I thought it was more about their energy and spirit and morale against Milan, more so than their actual play, because their actual play was up and down. I think they had their opportunities in that game. They really weren't as threatening as some people want to make out. I think it was more about Milan in that game. And again, this isn't to take away from Roma. If you understand what I'm saying, I think this is more about, there was a team that had a plan, they executed it, whereas the other team, Milan, were coming out lackadaisical. I don't think they kind of came across as taking Roma as seriously as they should have. You and I were both saying this was not going to be easy at all. You weren't confident in a result. So in the second leg, you kind of have to approach it like, does Olivier Giroud sit? And the odds are no. But the real question is, does Ruben Loftus-Cheek sit, Pulisic as the 10, and Samuel Chukwueze in this current form, so good, plays on the right side, and you kind of sit there with, Tijani Reinders double pivot with a Yassine Adli. Who pairs with Reinders? There's a lot of big questions here, because obviously Calabria didn't start over the weekend. He's clearly getting slotted into the right back position. And again, Milan have played on a bigger stage too. All right. Going into Napoli with just a 1-0 lead last year against those guys were just a much more difficult tie. So for me, how do you think Milan come out with this starting wise with the 11?
Giroud starts. I think he starts in this game, especially because Jovic started on the weekend. I think just that's right out of the Pioli playbook. We already know what he's going to do. So Giroud's going to start. I think the big question is, does he go really offensive heavy? Does he play his main three attackers, who by all accounts are in solid form, right? I think that he should. Do I think he will? Probably not, especially because he played, started Chukwueze. So I think there's an opportunity there for Pulisic to start on the right, Leao on the left, and then Ruben Loftus-Cheek is playing in that more advanced role that he's played pretty frequently this entire season. And then you bring Chukwueze on, in the second half, or maybe for a good 30 minutes, and you try to catch Roma's tired legs, because I think they're going to give a lot. They're going to try to make this a scrappy game. So I think there's two ways that Pioli goes about it. I think the key for me is, regardless, because based off the way we're playing offensively, if it is Chukwueze and Pulisic and Leao, then fine. Like, they're all in pretty good form, right? So you feel good about it. But I don't think there's a reason why not to play them, right? But if he does go with Ruben Loftus-Cheek and he says, hey, I want to bring Chukwueze on, I want to be able to have him provide that impact and stretch the opposition, then you can do that too. I think the concern for me is the midfield, because I think, again, the way De Rossi's team has been playing so far, and him being a midfielder himself in his playing days, I think that is going to be the key area for this team. And that sounds very, cliche, right? All the games are won in the midfield. But I think that the way that we've been kind of getting overrun in certain games when we do lose, and the way we played against Sassuolo, it gives me a lot of concern coming into this one. So I think that with Tijani coming back, I think that's a boost. I do worry about the lack of a strong defensive element in our midfield, and we have been worrying about it for really since the summer, when we didn't get a true defensive midfielder in there. So I think the midfield is going to be the key in this one. If Milan's midfield can sharpen up and fill in those spaces and not let Roma kind of run and gun and win that midfield battle, I like Milan to have a pretty controlled game and a much better game than the one they had in the reverse leg.
Yeah. This is all going to come down to that. I also think they have to stop Dybala anytime he gets his feet around the ball. We'll see if Tammy Abraham, I'm not sure if he was called up to the Europa League squad. I'm not really sure if he's eligible. Kind of been scrambling around to kind of get that stuff. But for me, I think Roma still have the individual quality, even if the 11 per se isn't as strong. Say they have a somewhat off night. Lukaku and Dybala are guys who obviously can do damage. Lorenzo Pellegrini is still such a fantastic player, pretty much reborn under De Rossi, because he actually understands how to use this player. And again, regardless of what you think of Mancini, and I think the Roma fan base kind of overrates him, but this is still a player that is going to not back down against you. And this is someone that you have to kind of, I'm not saying bait into making a silly foul, but he is a player that you could also get under his skin as opposed to vice versa.
He's probably their version of Teo. Like
he is just a much worse version.
Not quality wise, but
just
I'm talking about like
far less quality. Far less quality, like not even in like the same stratosphere as quality.
Yeah.
I have to say that. So with that, I do think, unfortunately, prediction wise, where I'm going with this is it's a 1-1 draw, and I think Roma go through to the next round. I'm not fully convinced by this Milan side. I do absolutely think they could pull this off in advance, but for me, with Roma in this advantageous spot, they kind of come off, not playing a full 90, the game ended a little bit earlier against Udinese, but I think morale and momentum is on Roma's side, whereas for Milan, it's not so much that. But again, Jekyll and Hyde Milan the past 18 months, almost 24 months, where you see them play terrible in Serie A, and then, like it could carry over into the week against, Roma, where they play great. But listen, I don't trust them right now. And I think with Roma's form and how they've been playing, I trust them more. And unfortunately for us, it would be Milan being eliminated in the quarterfinals, which is an absolute disgrace and should cost people some of their jobs. So your predictions heading into this?
So I'm going to go 2-1 to Milan at full time. And this goes into extra time. And I actually think that actually Milan are going to advance. I'm not going to tell you the fashion. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to penalties. I feel like that's so, like, it's just difficult to project certain like things like that. If there's cards, if there's, chaos happening in that extra time. Mm-hmm. I do think that you got to consider the fact that Milan did have a lot of opportunity to get goals. They had a lot of low percentage chances. And this is one of their worst performances of 2024. And they're still just down 1-0 to a team that they have been in really good form against. Do you think that Milan are going to drop 2 duds? I don't know. Like, beating Milan twice after you haven't beaten them in a while. So I do think that I'm going to stick by Milan in this match. And I do think that my prediction of them progressing holds up barely. I think it's going to be one of those dogfights. It's going to be a gritty match. It's going to be cards. It's going to be a ton for the emotions. I know it's going to be
any red cards. You think there's going to be a red card? I think that could definitely be a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely going to be a lot of bookings. So I think that the way Milan played in the first leg, didn't really get anything from Rafa. Pulisic didn't really play that well.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that they're going to get shut down a second time? If this was a different defensive team, fine. If Roma were stout defensively and they had this impeccable record there, then I can tolerate that. I agree.
Yeah.
But I think that you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, even when Milan were laboring last year in the league, right? They barely got into top 4.
Horrible, yeah.
Look at the performances they did turn up against Napoli.
So, right? Even Spurs. Spurs too was like
clean sheet, like we're talking clean sheets at home. We're talking, going on the road, and despite Giroud getting his penalty saved, Milan still progress in that game. So I think that Milan are going to come out firing. I think they're going to be much more confident. They're going to play with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to probably tell themselves, we underestimated them in the first leg. We did. Things are going to change in the second leg, and I do think Milan, again, as I mentioned in my prediction a couple weeks ago, progress barely to the semifinal.
Yeah. Well, more positivity from Matt than myself.
Usually I'm kind of like more on the fence, and you're usually the one to kind of pull me back onto the optimistic side. But
it depends. It depends on the match. because sometimes I'll just like jump down with you into the
Yeah.
deep end. But yeah, listen, we appreciate all your support.
Yeah.
Continue to support us on Apple and Spotify podcasts for the audio version of the podcast. You guys listen pretty much the entire time. We greatly appreciate it. We appreciate all the views that we get on YouTube. Please subscribe, share to your friends who are interested in Milan, or even if you're U.S. men's national team fans or just overall fans of the sport. We think we do great work here, and so do many others, Max and Gino, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Gio and Fabio on Coast to Coast, Sempre Milan podcast, obviously, Steady Sit Down. And again, with the guys at Milan Weekly Podcast, Vinny and Steve are always fantastic. Maybe and Kush, obviously, for his channel. Go and check out that episode when he joined us. Other than that, Matt, any final comment before we head on out here?
No, it's the final stretch of the season. We got a really important week coming up. I mean, you got Roma, got the derby, which we will definitely, hopefully, get together to preview. And then you have Juventus as well. So some big matches coming up for Milan. Let's finish the season strong. Let's not lose sight of the objective here. And yeah, Forza Milan.